Alright, hey everyone, thanks for popping by my video. Micah here, just talking to you about this concept we've been probably maybe hearing about recently, maybe in the news a bit more than, usual, but this concept called price controls, right? Price controls, right? What do they mean, and why are they potentially maybe dangerous? What does it do? I mean, how are we going to control the price is maybe one of the questions, right? Are we going to subsidize it? Or are we going to cap the amount that someone can sell their product or service for? We're talking maybe about recently, in this case, we're talking about, I think a presidential candidate, in this case, we're talking about Kamala Harris, talking about price controls. And this doesn't really, from my perspective, it's not really exclusive to maybe just one candidate or one person. It's more about the concepts, right? Why does price controls actually, why is it a bad thing possibly, right? The thing is, it sounds good on the surface, the idea of keeping prices low for something like food. Everybody needs food, right? But and certainly, we want people to have access to food, right? I'd like to think that everybody would like to have, everybody have good access to good food, right? But at an affordable price, right? But at the same time, how do we determine such a thing? The food market is like so many different foods, right? There's a vast amounts of different foods and ingredients that some of them can fluctuate significantly. Maybe some of them are more stable. I'm not familiar with commodity prices, etc. But bottom line, if you're, going to have all these different ingredients all the time that could fluctuate and change in price and sources, how do you regulate that? I mean, what basically it would be saying to the producer, the business owner, the grocer, the manufacturer, but the producer, someone who makes it, cereal, or someone makes, canned beans, whatever it is, right? They have a plant or a facility, and basically everybody is, a producer. Everybody has, a job or a career or a business, right? Essentially, not everybody, obviously, not everybody does, but theoretically, everybody does something for a living to be productive, right? Somebody does some way to maintain their expenses, their cost of living, right? So, if we have a cost of living, it's based upon our individual needs and desires, the things that we want that work for us, right? We could probably say there's a few key things, sure, that everybody, has to have, water, food, right? Housing, some kind of housing, and, maybe, access to some transportation. We see, transportation, like, we have legs, right? It's like, does everybody need, what is the level of needs that people have? That could be very debatable, right? So, but the thing is for the individual to be able to decide what their needs are. It allows them to also take into account on a micro level all the expenditures that go into their desired lifestyle, right? What they feel is most important to them as an individual. So, if we say, hey, the price control, right? Now, that kind of says, hey, well, to the seller, like you said, the business owner, right? It's saying, hey, we're taking away some of the incentive to sell and produce that product, to bring that product to the market, right? So if you have someone that is producing, like I said, cereals, right? They make, cereals. Now, this could be debatable whether something's a good product and all that stuff. I'm not saying to absolutely no regulations or something like that, but if we have price control, we are adding an additional regulation, right? Additional regulation, which in and of itself requires expenditure and cost, right? Governmental cost, etc. Whoever's controlling the government there, right? So, and I'm just talking about the concepts of kind of like capitalism versus socialism, because we're talking about a regulation that is put on, a product or a service or some kind of interaction, right? Otherwise free interaction, ideally. Or is there anything such thing as total freedom? Well, no, everything. We're in an environment where, we have to get stuff from the earth, we have to mine stuff, we have to agriculture, we have to develop systems, right, that take a lot of time and practice and trial and error and perfection and overall expenditure and investment that can't even really be quantified, right? So, we're talking about a complex systems of expenditure, right? So in order to drive people to do that, they have to have incentives to do that, right? Is the incentive to get more food to the marketplace. Certainly, a lot of people that produce foods, that's one of their big driving factors, I'm sure, right? But also for, I don't know what the percentage is. Obviously, it's just the total guess, but what is the percentage of motivation that is based around making a living or even creating wealth, right? You know, uh, someone has to be a good leader to create wealth, maybe, right? Maybe they need to not only be a farmer, but they need to change something about the industry and promote vast improvement, or lead a large group of other farmers to do their systems or something like that, a business or something, right? So, they can maybe even get wealthy by being a great leader in their industry, but in the technological field or something like that, right? It's all technology, right? It's all technology. Agriculture is technologies, right? It's development, right? So research and development is a massive expenditure, right, in creating new products and services, whether it's foods or non-food items, right? So research and development, and that's stuff that really is hard to quantify, right? Like you said, for a business owner, they may have a business that takes them a bit of time to start even making any profit, right? So they might have worked for a long time for low cost or free or something like that to develop that business. There's different reasons why they might be charging a higher price, right? A higher price than we might think it should cost, right? And the idea, though, is also competition, right? Everybody talks about competition. I mean, I'm sure you've heard about these concepts with many other videos, or you've thought about capitalism and socialism and what they mean. But if we regulate the market more, we're basically adding to the expenditure. We're adding to the cost of a product or a service, right? Does that mean we shouldn't have any regulations? Well, no. I mean, in order to get things processed to their final form, products or services to their final form, obviously we have to do things in accordance with procedures a lot of times. There can be chemicals involved. There could be the safety of people involved in an airplane or a building or something like that. Yeah, I mean, we probably should say, hey, there's some level of regulations and standards, right, that should be in the marketplace, and say absolutely no government. But also we need to maximize incentive and supply if we want to have overall a bigger supply of that product or service, right? What happens when a product or service gets a bigger supply, right? We understand economics, right? Generally the price is probably going to go down, right? There's a bigger supply of it, right? Maybe the one business owner has a large supply of something, right? They're probably going to want to offload it pretty quickly unless they're otherwise using it. So then we're also thinking about property rights. Why is somebody obligated to sell our product or service even in the first place? We have property rights, then overall we determine the price that it might be sold for. Are we obligating people to sell their product and services? What drives them to build up that capital in the first place, whether it's inventory or just money or whatever, to save that money? There's incentive to save and build capital, right? To build and save capital. So, if they decide to buy a bunch of inventory, they're thinking, hey, I can make $50,000 if I sell all this inventory over the next 6 months or even a month or whatever it is, right? They're taking a risk. They're putting their own self, and they're investing. They're saved money they didn't spend on other stuff, right? We want to drive that maximum because they're getting more product and services to the marketplace, right? Maybe they're starting to charge a high price, but maybe they're the only one that's really providing that product or service at that quality level, right? One of the few suppliers. In which case, if we put a price control, they might be less incentivized to be the only supplier. Right now, if we're telling other businesses they can't compete, that might be more of a problem, in my opinion, a monopoly, right? And if other businesses can't even start a business, not necessarily because of limited resources, but because, a governing agency is telling them they're not allowed to compete or have another business, or they're, not able to, like another businesses somehow directly, stifling another business from being able to have their own business. That would be kind of like theft or vandalism or something along that lines, right? Messing, up somebody's other their property, right? Their property, right? Which is maybe their business, right? And like our home is a business in a sense, right? It's not in the same sense that, oh, we're thinking about it and just, well, we do. Well, many people do budget their home like a business. You have expenditures, right? So, and if we just put all of this responsibility for determining the best prices, right? The government, we're taking it out of our own hands and basically taking away a lot of the choices that we would have, right? A lot of the choices that we would have. That's one of the big things I think the socialist mind, a lot of people might say, is we have too many choices for many products and services. Bottom line, if something doesn't work in a free market, if it doesn't work, it's going to lose money and people aren't going to be wanting to sell it anymore, right? So the market kind of can largely be the regulator of these prices for all these individual products and services that can be engineered and created and developed, right? So, somebody doesn't, if they, then bottom line, if you create a product that doesn't really work, people don't want it, right? It doesn't matter how long we work on it, right? It matters it also matters, it's not just what we supply, it's also what the market demands, right? So we have to recognize that if we're going to, meet the market demand, we have to say, hey, maybe sometimes the price has to be high, right? And if there's only one person selling bottles of water and there's a place where it's, there's no water, there's some people there that need some water, I mean, obviously that's, it's a dire situation potentially, right? But if the person selling a bottle of water for $20 a bottle all of a sudden, because they only have 20 of them, right? It's kind of like you have to ration the best you can. Is that going to be perfect? Is it going to get everybody? Not every time. No, not necessarily. But maybe the person that has the more money can afford 2 or 3 bottles of water and decides to share a little bit of it or something like that, right? But overall, what they're doing is motivating the people who brought the water to bring more water, right? To bring more water. Ideally, is that always perfect? No. I mean, there's all kinds of situations where people take advantage of a situation. But in a sense, it's kind of like, well, it's better to have some kind of access to water than absolutely no water, because nobody was incentivized at all to bring it. And everybody say, hey, well, look, it's just not worth it. I don't know. Maybe it takes them a long time to get the water there because they had to drive 200 miles, and that's the reason why they're charging more money for this water, right? So there's different they had to, bottom line, they wouldn't have had the resources to do it without that extra money, right? They're maybe making a sacrifice and that kind of thing. So that's just one hypothetical scenario, right? But same thing with food. If we bring food to the marketplace, and if we take away the incentive, a good part of the incentive to get food to the marketplace, so the profit, we're eliminating potentially a good percentage of that food supply. Now, does that really sound great? Right? Now, this is what we say, maybe the communist mind might lead to, bread lines, right? Socialism, too much socialism. Why? Because it's like cutting out of overall production, right? So we give too much stuff free, too many regulations, too many safeties, too many subsidies, too many protections, right? We're taking away individual personal responsibility to make better buying decisions, better budgeting decisions, live a better life on a personal level. And, if we do that, I don't know if that's necessarily better, right? But is this really going to get, is that going to help our society obtain and acquire and build more wealth as a society? Maybe not, right? The thing is like if there's too much of a supply, like you said, the supplier, right? The person who might be looked at as the gouger of the prices, right? They have a supply and they're selling it for too high, and if that's probably because they only have a certain amount of it, right? They don't have very much of it, right? And there is a bigger supply of it. People are wanting what they only have 10 new versions of this new car, right? This new car that people are kind of anticipating they want to get because it has new features and different reasons, safety factors or whatever that might be important to them, or that, they have to do a little experimentation in the marketplace. We have to find out what's working better, and people have to try stuff out, right? Nothing's perfect, but if they only have 10 of this new car, then yeah, they might be selling them for a little more for different reasons. Right, and there's different marketing tactics out there. Yeah, sometimes people pay too much for something. maybe, or we say it's too much, right? People get on the cutting edge of people want to buy the latest thing, and they spend a lot of money. The newest Xbox costs $500, and you think, well, people fork over $500 every 2 years for a new Xbox, whatever. But at the same time, those people, they can afford it. Maybe they can't really. They shouldn't be doing it, but they're making that sacrifice. It's not a perfect society, but is it totally perfect if we actually cut the supply totally, right? And maybe a few of something is better than none of something, right? So if we take the supply of those Xboxes or new electronic equipment or something like that, and somebody does pay for too much, they're helping to invest in that industry largely. Right, they're investing in saying, hey, we're going to try this product while it's kind of new. It's kind of just starting out. And same thing with foods, right? Some people put out a new product, and other people say, oh, let me try it out. Maybe it's just ultimately not what they want. Maybe they spend a little bit too much money. They're going to probably over time determine and come to some equilibriums in many cases, right? And that's the reason why we want to have more freedom of choice, so you can compete, right? You can say, hey, this product looks just as good, if not better, for a lower price, as much as possible, right? And this, in my sense, is largely economic freedom, right? It also goes into social freedoms too. You have the right to freedom of speech, to sell your product or service for what you want. It's kind of like a freedom of speech thing. I'm not here to tell you what to think about it. I'm just telling you the way I perceive it, right? Capitalism versus socialism, it's about the rules that, as a society, we agree on, right? If we agree on too many rules, right, eventually it gets to be too much. Like a price control, right? It's going to cost more money for anything, and it's going to bring a lower supply. You think about countries like, like Zimbabwe or something, where, I think the banks have printed way too much money, and they've basically, totally inflated the money way beyond, or Venezuela or something like that. I could be wrong about these particular two. These are just a couple of potential examples, not to single any countries out, but, countries that have maybe had largely, the fiat money has been out of control, and they might have to spend 100,000 units on a dozen eggs or something like that, right? Because the money is just way devalued, right? Because, then people aren't allowed to start businesses. They're not capable of starting businesses because the businesses aren't protected, right? Just as entities are treated like, the socialist mindset always sees something that it has more than what they have and wants to get a piece of it. And maybe in some cases, yeah, we like, humanity, right? There's a level of socialism there that, like, yeah, an individual, you see a person starving, you might try to do what you can to get them some food, right? Or whatever it is that you can, each person should be entitled to some level of, right? Then this is just an opinion. It's just an opinion, right? Each person should be entitled to a certain level of, life, liberty, the fruits of our productivity. The fruits of our productivity, right? Some people are vastly bigger producers than others. They have the boldness, they have the skill, right? And then sometimes we just have to face the fact that there are people out there that are much better than us at certain things, right? They're much more successful. But what it does is gives us an example, gives us something to learn from, right? And even potentially compete with, right? To help us all improve our lives, even if we're not number one, right? Would you rather be rich in a poor country, or would you rather be poor in a rich country? It's kind of like a concept that maybe you take it to extremes, it depends on, every factor, like, are you a victim of a crime or something like that? But, if you're born poor, and I would contest that perhaps, being born more on the poor side in a rich country is maybe possibly better more often than being born rich in a poor country, right? Being born rich, or being rich in a poor country, right? Because then it's kind of like you're in an island, right? You're maybe the center of attention to where you might draw a criminal, like, people that want to take your wealth or whatever, right? You're seen as maybe an elitist or something because you had more wealth, right? You're the only one in your society, or one of the few in your society that has a lot of wealth, right? Might not be such a great society to live in just because you're rich, right? But if you're poor in a rich society, you have potential upward mobility. It's there. You can see it. Right? You can see the nice houses. You can see the nicer cars. You can see what the jobs that other people are getting and doing, and you even have a chance to contend for them yourselves. So you can compete in the marketplace and produce more, and that means maybe you get a job as a food producer yourself in some way. Whether it's food delivery, food production, whatever, you're helping to deliver more food to the marketplace. And when there's more supply, what happens to the price? The price can go down, right? But if we keep like flooding the money supply and subsidizing and regulating everything, right, we're reducing the choices. Like I said, it doesn't mean we should have any regulations. Yeah, no chemicals, certain chemical, right now, maybe we have to, we have a lot of chemicals in the foods now. Is it really, but if we had just some certain key regulations that we don't remove or take off, well, at the same time, kind of like housing, right? If you have too many regulations, and then they have a hard time starting a housing construction company or starting a food company. There's more regulations and more things saying, hey, this is less incentive to do this business. This business, whatever their business is, supplying steel, supplying food, going to get oil, or mining for some, I don't know, lithium or something you can see more extreme scenarios too, right? In more extreme scenarios, people get hired, we call third world countries, or someplace in some country where they don't have very many job options, and they have to work in some manufacturing plant for low wages, and they're working very long hours, and yeah, that's terrible. At the same time, right, a lot of these people are probably, in many cases, working at these jobs because they see it as the best available opportunity to them under their personal circumstances, right? Who am I to tell them what to do, right? And to tell them they don't have this opportunity. This kind of goes into this other concept of minimum wage hikes, right? Minimum wage hikes, say minimum wage. Well, what, to an extent, really, what's to stop me from personally raising my minimum wage right now? What's to stop me? Well, what stops us maybe is competition. So someone else is willing to do a better job for less, right? So, but that's part of market competition, and that drives personal desire. It says, yeah, do I really want to be an astronaut or an engineer or somebody that makes airplanes, or do I really want to pursue that, that endeavor? Well, that's a personal decision. Largely allows us to do the best to be what we want to be for a living, right? To be what we want to be for a living, instead of maybe a state mandated system. If you can imagine, some worst case scenario where you're even a slave, like the state's telling you what job field you have to go into or something like that, right? Maybe taking away your freedoms because they have to make up for a lack of production, like food, for example, because all of a sudden price control on some certain ingredient, and now it's no enough incentive because it's harder to get or access that ingredient. And they say, oh, well, now we can't bring that ingredient anymore because nobody's motivated to go do it because they can't charge what they want to charge for it, right? Or people are not willing to pay for it. That's the market talking there, right? The market's just saying, hey, look, we're not really wanting this product. It's too expensive. It's a great product, but it's just too expensive. We're not willing to spend the money for this extra product, So they say, hey, well, maybe we could lower the price. Well, bottom line, it's hard to get this product. Let's just stop doing this business. Let's stop trying to supply this product. The product's really in demand enough. People are going to say, hey, I want to buy this product. Then someone's probably going to say, hey, let me start this business. Let me find this market here and serve this market, right? Well, there's a market for this product or service, right? So that's kind of what everybody's doing when they're looking at, selling their food. Right? If you're a food, you may give me your opinions. Give me your thoughts on this. I certainly appreciate you listening in and certainly welcome your feedback on this because I know it's a big discussion lately, and it's not to demonize someone on a personal level, but, I have a hard time with the concepts of too much socialism because I do see it, kind of interfering with freedom, right? The freedom of personal choice to say, hey, you do want to try something new or different. Now, like I say, there shouldn't be no government regulation, no oversight of any kind. This also goes into things like tariffs and embargoes, right? And other fees that the government can impose arbitrarily, right? Just for example, in driver's license expense, or insurance that's mandated. Uh, Now, maybe in some cases, it's not like to say there's no room for any government mandates at all. But the more we mandate, the more we raise the expense. We made it harder to enter that space, whatever that space is. And that's what's cutting competition, right? So it's bringing less opportunities for people overall, right? Overall, it's bringing less production. So it's like you said, a rich in a poor society or poor in a rich society. I mean, are we better off trying to, like you said, if we build more capital in the marketplace, if everybody's being productive, and we do try to all have some kind of living and be productive, and weren't all totally dependent on, like government programs all the time, right? We're trying to be productive. We're going to get a job that we're creating some of those food products and stuff like that, right? Then overall we're producing more in the marketplace, right, and causing prices to go down. So yeah, it is a call for every American to go to work, some kind of, find something you can do for a living that people will pay you for, right? Maybe it is a base job, or maybe it's something food delivery or something like that. But you can also be creative. You can, become a musician. You can become a performer. You can do different things. But we have to start somewhere, right? You have to start somewhere, right? Sorry, I have a lot of interference with these. I have birds, but hey, thank you for listening in. I just want to encourage maybe to give me your feedback on your thoughts on what is the motivating factor behind a lot of people wanting to say, hey, the price controls is. I know it sounds good on the surface, but is it really a wise idea? Right? Is it really a wise idea? Think about it. What's incentivizing people and companies and investors, right? And also that's another thing too, capital gains, right? People that are investing in corporations that, food producers, should food come from corporations? That's kind of a personal opinion, I guess. You get to buy the product that you feel is most suitable for your needs, right? If you don't want to buy from any corporations, you want to buy local, and that might be the best. It's kind of decentralizing, in my opinion. That is providing competition to the corporations. Same time, a lot of corporations have a pretty set system down. They provide a pretty solid product and service that a lot of people will use. So, like in my opinion, it's not like there's no room for corporations at all. Right? It's a social construct. In a sense, we call it capitalism, but it's kind of like a social construct of what consists of a corporation. What are the rules of the corporation? What are the rules? What are the tax mandates? What are the regulations that are imposed upon those businesses? Right? Do we need to play so many arbitrary games, and just say, hey, like, the tax credit for this and tax, why don't we do something a little more flat and level and let the free market kind of work at the maximum reasonable level, allow people to start agriculture to produce better, more competition in the marketplace. It's probably been industries like that have kept competitors out of the marketplace. These are the most socialist businesses, in my opinion. They want to control other businesses and tell them they can't have their business. Right? Now, obviously, you're competitive in the marketplace, and every person's an individual that governs their own property and business. So, in a sense, it's not like no government, it's individual government, right? The maximum amount of individual government for a more fluid economy and to, create a more productive society. What are we going to live in some communist type of plantation or something like that where all the food's generated by a few slaves or something like that? I mean, how are we going to incentivize people to, make some people do some certain jobs by mandate, right? Even if they're getting paid for it, maybe it's not what they want to do for a living. Right? We want to give people the maximum chance to do what they want to do. If we want to do that, then we want to recognize the ability and the power of the free market to allow them to find their niches between them and the market. It's not just about the value that we personally provide, but it's about the value that about the value that the market perceives, really, especially if you're going to plan to sell something. If you plan to make a living with your product or service. So anyway, this is Micah here, just rambling on for a few minutes. Maybe you listen in and you kind of hear a little bit of what I'm saying in terms of why capitalism allows us to have more abundance, right? Allows us to have access to more overall abundance. Like I said, if someone gets a surplus, they're probably going to sell it for less. They're going to want to get rid of it. It's too much. They can't store it. They can't hold it for very long. They see it's a waste. It's getting ruined. They're going to want to sell it for a market price that works, right? So that's, if they're not enough of something, yeah, it's their property. We respect their property. You kind of understand how actually that is helping to create more abundance overall. Let me know your feedback, your opinion, your little nuanced thoughts that might come up listening to me ramble. All right, Micah signing out. Look forward to seeing you next time. Maybe check out my other videos.